I'm going to try to get the weather at my current location using JavaScript. This will also involve calling a third-party API called MetaWeather. The first step is just getting my location, and I want to show essentially the steps that I went through when I was figuring out how to do this. So the first thing I did was to simply Google get user location. And I added MD in because I wanted to get the Mozilla documentation. This first hit is good, but what I really want is this usage guide because it's full of example code. It starts out by explaining how to even test if it's possible to get the location, but I'm just going to plug ahead assuming that it is possible. So I'm going to take this code and modify it because they have this mock function called do something. But just to show what exactly can be done here, I'm going to use console.log to show what information is coming in here. Now when I hit run in the console here, after a second, we have the latitude and longitude coordinates of my present location or somewhere thereabouts. Now, the next step is I'm going to have to call the MetaWeather API. That's going to involve calling XML HTTP request, and it's also going to involve calling this MetaWeather API as I mentioned. So I'm going to call up the documentation for both of those. And the first thing I need to do is, well, if you look at this API, you'll see that you can get the, for example, 5-day forecast by calling this endpoint. And it takes this particular thing, WOEID. We need to convert latitude and longitude into this ID, and they provide another endpoint that will do that for us. So this endpoint, the API location search lat long, allows us to do this, and they have an example here. So here up in the URL bar we have an example of how you would access this endpoint, and here we see basically what would get returned. This is data in the JSON format, JSON, and it's a number of cities ranked by their distance from the latitude and longitude that I entered. Their example here is somewhere near Santa Cruz. Now, I could take my latitude and longitude and insert them up here. Gonna have to massage it just slightly. And it shows that the nearest Portland in its database by me is Portland. And it also returns as part of that its WOEID. So we're going to connect all this together. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a XML HTTP request to do the latitude and longitude lookup that we want. So I'm going to copy this example code from the Mozilla documentation again. This is super simple, straightforward anyway, if I can get it copied. Now, I need to make this request once I have the longitude and latitude. So if you'll notice, this here is a callback function. I'll put it on another line to make it a little bit more obvious that it is a separate thing from what's outside of it. I only have access to the latitude and longitude once I get inside this callback function. So that's where I'm going to put this XML HTTP request because it's going to require the latitude and longitude. Now, the documentation gave me this URL. So I'm going to put that in here. I'm going to use this somewhat newer JavaScript feature that's going to allow me to embed some things here. Specifically, I want the latitude and longitude. Not sure why that coloring is not looking correct, but we'll see if it runs. That doesn't need to be there. Okay. Let's hit run. Should take it a second. Now you'll notice it did find my latitude and longitude, but I got this error that says access to HTTP request at blah 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 from origin fiddle.jshell, so that's JS fiddle, has been blocked by CORS policy. Now, in a better world, maybe this wouldn't be a problem. What I did, and this is a little bit ugly, was I copied the very beginning of this error, and that brought me to this Stack Overflow question where essentially the same thing is going on, and the person's response, oops, is this not the answer I want? This is not the answer I want. Sometimes it's not the first one. Here we go. So this was the second hit under the for Stack Overflow responses. This is really just make it work, bare bones. Bottom line is you take this https://coresanywhere.herokuapp.com/ copy that, and you put it in front of the URL that you are trying to access. There we go, and let's try it again. And boom. Now what we've done so far is we've just done the search from the latitude and longitude, and now we need to use this WOEID to actually get the weather. So that's going to involve accessing another endpoint here. So let me scroll down. So this is the new endpoint. So let me just copy that. And notice it uses this again. The WOEID is going to be the last part of it. So we still need to do this. We still need to look up the WOEID from the latitude and longitude. But now that we've got it, we actually, well, the first thing we need to do is we need to convert this raw text, which is in, again, JSON format. JSON, I'm really not sure how to pronounce it. But just turn it into a JavaScript object so that we can use it more easily. So I'm going to just name it something stupid like R. And this is built into JavaScript. I can just call this, pass in the response from the API, and now that will give me an object. Now, if you look at this, the outer thing here is this square bracket, and then you see there's this list. So this is an array of objects. So the first thing is that I'm just going to go into the very first element, element 0, and I'm going to get the WOEID. Now, but what am I going to do with that? Well, basically I'm going to do this same thing again, and because I'm using vanilla JavaScript, XML HTTP request, I have to do this kind of nested thing rather than using something nice like a promise. So I'm just going to have another XML HTTP request with another callback listener, which I'm going to set up right here. This is going to be a little bit ugly forever. I'm going to call this listener 2 because that's how imaginative I am. And it is going to essentially do the same thing, so we can still do that. Now that is old news. Well, actually, this is not sure how far into formatting the end result I'm going to get, but now let me go back and recopy this endpoint because I probably lost that along the way. And that's going to go in here. Again, I need the cores anywhere. And similar thing here. But now instead of latitude and longitude, it's going to be this thing, which I just left hanging there for a minute. Now, it's a little bit ugly the way everything is named right now, but let's see, I think this is okay. Oh, I didn't see somewhere. I need to make sure that says listener 2. Okay, so if this works, it should give me the weather for my current location. Oops. Now it's going to be in this JSON format right now. But yeah, there it is. It has the weather for Portland. You can take my word for it, or you can read the book and do it yourself. Happy coding. I hope this was useful. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them. And I hope to see you next time.